Today we will be talking about having a relationship in our pivot model in Laravel. So to understand more about this, let's take an example. So if we look into this migration file, we can see that we are creating role user table, and in this table we have role ID, user ID, and team ID as columns. This first role ID and user ID are for the many-to-many relationship between roles and users table. And this team ID is actually our extra column which references the ID of teams table, right? So now, if we look, first of all, let's look at our database. So we can see we have role ID and user ID for our many-to-many relationship between roles and users, right? And we also have team ID, which has a reference to our teams table. So if I click on this ID, it will take us to the teams table with an ID of 1, right? So now if we look at this user model, we have many-to-many relationship, that is roles, right? So that means it belongs to the role class, and we also have pivot element, that is team ID. And also if we can see using user role model, right? Now if I go to this role user model, it's not just our usual model, because it's extending pivot instead of model. So in this user role we have a relationship, that is team. So what we are doing is we are having a relationship called team from this pivot model, and we are using this pivot model in the many-to-many relationship, that is in our roles relationship, right? So now if we go to this controller, and we can see this query saying user find 3 roles. So what it does is it fetches the user with ID of 3, and then it gets all of the roles where the ID of role is actually 1. So now if I run this query, we will get the role with ID of 1, that is in our database. If we look at the role with ID of 1, it's the admin. So this is what we get after we run the query. And also we can see this pivot information, right? So that is your user ID is 3, and then role ID is 1, and then team ID is 1. So now if we just do pivot up here, it will only give the pivot information, right? So these are the information from our pivot table. And as we know, we have a relationship called team in our pivot model. So what we can do is we can also call the team relationship from our pivot model class. So it's written the team with ID of 1. So now if I refresh this page, it should give us the team with ID of 1, that is ID of 1 and name is team ID. So this is what I wanted to show you, that we can also have a relationship in our pivot model